You guys are getting a bonus video because, one, it's picture day and I have lipstick, which never happens. And number two, because I've noticed a lot of kind of the same mistake on the test for Unit 1. So, one, when you're preparing for the next test, make sure that you do the study guide. Not just because I post the answers there, but because that information will be on your test. That's number one. Number two, make sure as we go through this next unit, you actually focus your attention on the videos and be intentional in your writing and be intentional in maybe doing some of those problems that we don't do together to make sure you understand. But let's look at the first test. These are just samples. One thing that I noticed that people weren't doing is distributing a negative sign. So for instance, if you have 2x minus x plus 4, you have got to distribute this negative here. 2x, you are not distributing. 2x is a term in and of itself. So I'm going to bring my 2x down. But I'm distributing this negative times a positive x is a negative x. And this negative times a positive 4 is a negative 4. Now when I combine like terms, I have 1x minus 4. Of course, I can just say that this is x minus 4. This is the simpler way to write it. Okay, so let's do another one together. If you have 4x minus 5 minus 2x plus 3, 4x comes down, minus 5 comes down. I am just distributing this negative. So it's a negative times a positive 2x, a negative times a positive 3, which is a negative 3. It changes the signs inside those parentheses. So now when I combine, 4x and negative 2x is 2x, and a negative 5 and a negative 3 is a negative 8. And that's my simplified answer. So that was one of the things that I noticed on the test. Another one is the properties. You've got to know your properties. The two biggest properties that we will talk about through the remainder of the year are additive inverse and multiplicative inverse. The reason they're so big, and especially in this next unit, is because we do it all the time. So if you have 2x minus 4 equals 10, to get x by itself, I'm going to add 4 to both sides. This property right here that allows me to cancel this out, that's additive inverse. That's a negative 4 and a positive 4 cancels out, leaving you with 2x equals 14. And then, of course, here we divide by 2, and I get x equals 7. But this is additive inverse. So remember, additive inverse is, it's the opposite canceling out. So on your test, if you had something like this, square root of 5 minus the square root of 5, these are opposites of each other. It doesn't matter what that number is, whether it's rational or irrational. It's the opposite, and they cancel out. That's additive inverse, okay? Multiplicative inverse. So let's look at multiplicative inverse. If you have 2/3 x equals 10, and I want to get x by itself, x by itself means I need to get 1x there. So I'm going to multiply by the multiplicative inverse 3 over 2. Multiplicative inverse is multiplying by its reciprocal, okay? And that cancels out 3 and 3, 2 and 2 to cancel out to give me that 1x. That's multiplicative inverse. It's canceling out to give me a positive 1. And don't forget, whatever I do on one side, I do to the other side. So here I cross-reduce 2 and 10 to give me 5. 5 times 3 is 15. And of course, we don't put that 1x, just x equals 15. Okay? That's multiplicative inverse. And it doesn't matter if my sign is negative. Let's say we have negative 4/5 x equals 24. I still, multiplicative inverse is multiplying to give me a positive 1. So I would multiply both sides by a negative 5/4. That's the only thing that's going to create this positive 1x. So those cancel out, those cancel out. I'm left with positive x, and whatever I do to one side, I do to the other side. Cross reduce here to get 6. 6 times negative 5 is negative 30. All right? So multiplicative inverse, this would be multiplicative inverse. Negative 3 times negative 1/3. I turn this into a rational number. I flip the reciprocal. That's multiplicative inverse, where my answer is 1. So again, properties are a really big deal. If you're still struggling on Unit 1, we need it to advance forward. So make sure you come and see me.